pleasant day to each and every one of us. I am ALRON your first presenter from this group. Before we begin and proceed to our discussion proper, let me introduce to you my other group members. After my report will be Mr. RENE GARBOSA, followed by Miss Christine FANO, DERICK GADAYAN, EDREL GAISEN, AKMAD GANDAL, and Miss ERLVIRA ESCOMES. The topic that will be discussed for today will be the 6 types of assessment. Assessments can be difficult to structure properly and is time-consuming to grade. And as a teacher, you know that student progress isn't just a number on a report card. There's so much more to assessments than delivering an end-of-unit exam or prepping for a standardized test. Assessments help shape the learning process at all points and give you insights into student learning. Now, the objectives for this discussion will be, at the end of the lesson, the students can identify the types of assessment, discuss the importance of assessments, and create 6 types of assessment. What are these 6 types of assessments? They are diagnostic assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, ipsative assessments, norm reference assessments, and the criterion reference assessments. Now, just to give you some points of view when it comes to these assessments, let me give you some brief discussion about what these assessments are all about. For the diagnostic assessment, it has a significant role in enhancing learning outcomes for every student. It assesses what the learners already knows, the roots of the complexity that he or she has, which if not diagnosed, might limit their engagement in new learning. It helps teachers and students how much they know and do not know about an upcoming lessons. This helps the teachers for lesson planning, learning objectives, and identifying areas that may need more or less time spent on. Next up will be the formative assessment. The timeliness of results enables teachers to adjust instruction quickly while learning is in progress. Students who are being assessed are the ones who benefit from the adjustment. This will help monitor students' learning to provide ongoing feedback. Next up is the summative assessment. This is to determine whether students are making adequate academic progress or meeting expected learning standards. Ipsative assessment. This is to measure or track the progress of the learner by comparing his or her performance or scores from his or her previous performances or scores. Second to the last is the norm reference assessment. The norm reference assessment is a great help to differentiate students and identify those who may have specific educational needs or deficits. The criterion reference assessment is the last assessment. This is to determine whether educators and schools are successfully teaching students what they are expected to learn. This is also used to measure academic progress and fits in connection with the standards set by the institution or the administration. But first, let's find out how assessments can analyze, support, and further learning. The purpose of different types of assessment. Assessment of learning. Assessments are a way to find out what students have learned if they are aligning to curriculum or grade level standards. Assessments of learning are usually grade-based and can include exams, portfolios, which are common, final projects, standardized test, which is based on the standards set not just by the institution, but of course by the national economy, by the national standards set of the different institutions which are being approved. Next is the common types of assessment of learning includes the summative assessments, the norm reference, and the criterion reference assessment. For the assessment for learning, it is to provide you with a clear snapshot of student learning and understanding as you teach allowing you to adjust everything from your classroom management strategies to your lesson plans as you go. Now, the common types of assessment for learning includes the formative and the diagnostic assessments. And to give you another perspective about the importance of this assessment, this will help the teachers, the implementers, the instructors, and the administrators or the stakeholders to create a curriculum which is appropriate to the teaching learning process that will help the students and the teachers improve the implications and the process of teaching along the way of the academic year. Now, the assessment as learning will be discussed of our next reporter, who is Mr. RENE GARBOSA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaho. Now for the next topic will be the assessment as learning. Assessment as learning actively involves students in the learning process. It teaches critical thinking skills, problem solving, and encourages students to set achievable goals for themselves and objectively measure their progress. So, meaning to say is assessment is an important part of learning because it aids students in their learning, and students can determine whether or not they understand the course material when they can see how they are doing in class. So, students can be motivated by assessment. So, assessment aids teachers in the same way that it aids for the students. So, next, some examples of assessment as learning include ipsative assessment, self-assessment, and peer assessment. So, we are now on the six types of assessment to use in your classroom. The first one is diagnostic assessment. When you structure diagnostic assessment around your lesson, you'll get the information you need to understand student knowledge and engage your whole classroom. So it is very useful for learning, as it serves as your guide to adjust your teaching to improve the learning outcomes of your students. So one way to think about it, assesses a student's strength, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills prior to instruction. So it evaluates the learner already knows, as well as the nature of any difficulties he or she may be experiencing. So which, if untreated, may impede their ability to engage in a new learning. So tip, done at the beginning of the school year, beginning of a unit, or beginning of a lesson. Some examples to try include mind maps, flowcharts, KWL charts, short quizzes, journal entries, student interviews, student reflections, graphic organizers, and classroom discussion. So that is all about the diagnostic assessment. Now for the formative assessment, it will be reported by Miss FANO.
Thank you, Mr. Garbosa. We are now in number 2, which is formative assessment. Formative assessment help teachers understand students' learning while they teach and adjust their teaching strategies accordingly. Formative assessments help you to track how students' knowledge is growing and changing in your classroom in real time. The purpose of formative assessment is to track students' progress and provide continuing feedback that instructors and students can utilize to improve their teaching and learning. Formative assessments, in particular, assess students in identifying their strengths and weaknesses, as well as areas in which they need to improve. One way to think about it, assesses a student's performance during instructions and usually occur regularly throughout the instruction process. Formative assessment is used by the educator to qualitatively evaluate pupil comprehension, learning needs, and their curriculum journey during a session or unit. Fundamentally, the objectives of formative assessment is to improve teaching and learning as it happening. Tips: Using digital exit ticket tools like Loop can be an easy means of checking where students have understood lesson content while also promoting students' reflection. Here are some examples of formative assessment that teachers can use. So first, we have portfolios. Second, the group projects. So, in order for students interact not only in teacher but also to their classmates and also to build a good relationship to their peers. Next, we have progress reports to enhance the student skills in terms of public speaking. Next, we have a class discussion, so to interact and socialize to others. Next, we have entry and exit tickets. Then, short or regular quizzes. So, this is the most common that teachers do to assess the learning of the students after the discussion. Lastly, we have virtual classroom tools like Socrative or Kahoot. That's all for formative assessment. The next assessment will discuss by Mr. GAISEN.
Thank you so much, Miss FANO. Another type of assessment we have summative assessment. When we say summative assessment, it measures student progress as an assessment of learnings and provide data for you as school leaders and district leaders. One way to think about it is that it measures student achievement at the end of instructions. It's like talking to someone about a movie after the movie is over. By using measurements of students' performance, summative assessment can be useful for teachers to improve units and lessons year over a year because they are in a way as much of reflections on the quality of the unit and lessons themselves as they are the students. Here are some examples of summative assessment. It include instructor created an exam, standardized tests, final projects, final essays, final presentations, and final reports. The next topic will be reported by Mr. Gadayan.
Thank you, Mr. GAISEN. So now, we will proceed to our next topic, the ipsative assessments. Ipsative assessments are one of the type of assessments as learning that compares previous result with a second try, motivating students to get goals and improve their skills. When a student hand in a piece of creative writing, it's just the first draft. They practice athletic skills and musical talents to improve, but don't always get the same chance when it comes to other subjects like math. A two-stage assessments framework helps students learn from their mistakes and motivates them to do better. Plus, it removes the instant gratification of goals and teaches students learning in a process. Ipsative assessment is the practice of determining a student's progress based on their earlier work. Many assignments and rubrics are designed to measure students' work in the normative assessment mode, that is against a static set of criteria. Often so, but it's worth to take the time to examine why and how we use the assessment methods we do and consider the value of allowing students' own progress to be the benchmark against which successive performance is measured. You are surely familiar with the terms personal best in athletics. That's a good example of ipsative assessment. It is typically used in informal and practical learning such as sports, music, teaching, and recently in online gaming. It works as an iterative process where teachers and students work together to diagnose particular individual strengths and weaknesses, set some achievable goals or target against which progress will be assessed in the short or medium term, and articulate a clear, actionable plan to make them happen. By definition, it's highly personalized form of assessment where progress is measured against the needs and goals of the individual, not in comparison to the external standards or performance of peer. Thus, it improves the self-esteem and confidence, particularly for those who do not achieve high grades or put off by competitive environments. Continued dialogue between learner and teachers secure better engagement with feedback. It does also give tutor and students a long-term view of assessment. So, you can incorporate evaluative assessment into your classroom with the following. First is portfolio. Second is a two-stage testing process. And third is project-based learning activities. So that includes the evaluative assessment. Now, I will give the floor to our next presenter, Mr. AKMAD GANDAL.
Thank you, Mr. GADAYAN. So my report is all about norms reference assessment. Norm reference assessment are tests designed to compare an individual to a group of their peers, usually based on national standards and occasionally adjusted for age, ethnicity, or other demographics. So, the types of norms reference assessment is a type of assessment used in educational that allows teachers to compare student results to someone else in their peer groups. So it is refers to a method of evaluation that produces results allowing an educator to see if a student or a group of students have performed better or worse than a controlled reference group. So next is one way to think about it. So compares an student performance against other student in national group or other norms. This is a norm reference assessment is when students are compared with another. This form of assessment has been regarded as a group-centered, as comparisons within the group are made to establish how successful the pupil is in relation to others of the same age. Next is the tip. These kinds of assessment are useful over time in student profiles or for placement in national level programs. For example, they are including 3 types of norms reference. So first is the IQ test, physical assessment. The standardized college admission test like the SAT and GRE. So that is all my report. Next reporter is Miss ERLVIRA ESCOMES. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I am your last reporter for today. I am ERLVIRA ESCOMES and we will tackle the last type of assessment, which is the Criterion Reference Assessment. So what is Criterion Reference Assessment? Criterion Reference Assessments compare the score of an individual student to a learning standard and performance level, independent of other around on them. Criterion Reference Assessment is the process of evaluating or grading the learning of the students against a set of pre-specific qualities or criteria without reference to the achievement of others. And the pre-specific qualities or criteria are what students have to do during the assessment in order to demonstrate that they have achieved the learning outcomes. And one way to think about it, measures a student's performance against a goal, specific object, and standard. So here's the tip. This can be a kind of formative assessment and should be integrated throughout the curriculum to guide the adjustment of your teaching over time. Mastery or competency-based learning would use criterion reference assessment. And these are the examples of the criterion reference tests, which are the advanced placement exams and the national assessment of educational progress. And here we have the value of the criterion reference assessment. And here it is very important, a foundation for engaging students with the learning process, and it can be done well through providing a shared language between students, teachers, and assessors about assessment. And also, it identifies what valued in a curriculum and ensures that what is measured by assessment is the same as the skills, knowledge, and understanding defined by the intended learning outcomes. And also, it enables to evaluate of how well the students have achieved the criterion and identification of teaching, learning, and assessment practices that may need review. And also, it supports the students to develop strong evaluation, self-evaluation capacity, and providing tools for them to review, to refine, and improve their own work. And as a summary in this report, assessments are vital, yet it doesn't define someone's future or career. The learning process doesn't end once students put down their pencils at the end of the test. It's an ongoing process with plenty of opportunities for students to build a growth mindset and develop new skills. So here in assessment, it should be teachers should be reminded that if a student fail to have a good performance or good learning outcome in different kind of assessment, we should know how to deal with it. So we are trained to find a way for the student to improve and develop their learning capabilities, because not all students are the same. They have different personalities, they have different IQs, and they have the different level of comprehension and understanding and everything. Maybe a student is good in this kind of assessment, however in the other type of assessment they are not improving, or they don't excel in that matter. So as a teacher, we know how to adjust and put the focus on that student and find a better solution so that student will not be in a situation where discouragements and discrimination, and as well as we should not put pressure to that student. So I hope future teachers, future educators, we must master this kind of concept so that in the end of the day, we are able to impart knowledge and see our students excel in their own and in their journey. That's it. Once again, thank you for listening, everyone. This is ERLVIRA ESCOMES, your last reporter for today. God bless everyone. Stay safe.